It is Stacy. Welcome back to the Soul Pod. Today I want to talk about a topic that's it's out there. It's out there, but I want to talk about it because pretty soon it may not be so out there. There's research going on right now about and around telepathy, telepathic communications, which is I don't know where you're at with this, but in my mind it's always been a bit wild, really wild. The idea that we can read one another's minds, that one person could understand what another person is thinking. Though in my lifetime, I know that I've seen experiences that made me wonder. Little things like, you get that phone call as you're thinking about a specific person, or you call a person and they go, I was just thinking about you. Little things like that are sort of hints. So when I'm talking about telepathic communication or telepathy, I'm not talking about, widely reading the person's mind across the room from you, every single thought or whatever. What I'm talking about is those subtle things, and then some research that's emerging right now that I got to say blew my mind. Nikola Tesla, the great mind, the guy who made this electricity possible. He said once, or maybe perhaps he wrote it. He said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomenon, it will make more progress in one decade than it has in all previous centuries." I mean, think about that sentence. Think about that statement. When we start to study non-physical phenomenon, he said, we will make massive, massive growth in our understanding of the world. Like the progress will blow away everything we've done before in terms of scientific research. I think we're getting there. There's some really interesting and amazing stuff happening. To talk about this, I need to kind of back up a little bit, talk about the scientific method. So, where we're at right now, and some of this might be a review for you, but for some people who don't understand how this all works, how the scientific method works, we're in a state in science where everything's about materialism, and it's been like that since at least Descartes, probably even further back. I think therefore I am, said Descartes, and he made this connection between the separation between the mind and the body, and sort of put at some point in science, consciousness became less important. And what we could prove, materialism, the material thing that can be measured basically mathematically, if we can show it's true, then we'll proclaim it to be true, is the way science works. You need all the data, you need all the proof, and then you'll say, okay, this thing's true. If we can't do that, then we're like, that's what science tends to do. We don't understand that. We don't understand. That's weird. You can't prove that it's true or how it's happening, so we're just going to set that aside. We'll figure it out later. But they basically ignore it or shun it. And there are a lot of things like that. Um, I like to talk about radio waves. Before we understood what radio waves were, which was only what, like 150 years ago, 170 years ago, did that make radio waves not real? Because we didn't understand them. We didn't understand the mechanism for how they work, how to harness them, how to use them. Did that make them not real? Of course not. They were always real. They were always there. We just didn't have the ability to measure them or to understand what they were or how to harness them. And now it's like they're everywhere, right? We're using them right now. Wi-Fi, everything, everything, computers, just radio waves everywhere. We use them constantly. But for the vast majority of human existence, nearly a million years, nobody knew what the hell they were. So what else do we not know that we don't know? The challenge is with the scientific method is the Dunning-Kruger effect. See, if you're really smart in one area, you assume that you're really smart in every area. And scientists are pretty freaking smart. But the problem is that you can outsmart yourself. You know that the less intelligent a person is, the more likely they are to understand that they're not that intelligent in other areas. We're more likely, as somebody who's not highly educated, to go ahead and say, "Well, I probably don't understand that." To admit our flaws, to admit our weaknesses. Somebody who's highly intelligent in one area is more likely to assume that they're highly intelligent in many areas. And you can see this all the time, like so-called experts on TV talking about something they're really not qualified to talk about. Bill Gates is a great example. Intelligent guy, self-made billionaire in the tech industry, studied computer science and math before he dropped out of Harvard. after 2 years. Guy didn't study any medicine, but on TV all the time, he's talking about everything about medicine, like what we should do, what we shouldn't do. Like he's a medical expert. He's not a medical expert. He's never studied medicine. But because his opinion is so high of himself and he has such a high profile, he's treated with the respect that a medical expert might get. Now, somebody who had a lower profile tried that, they'd probably be laughed at. But that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. When someone of a high intellect in one area presumes great intellect in another. And this is where we're at with science right now. With science, we have scientists going, well, look, we're really freaking smart. We don't understand that weird anomaly thing you're pointing out. So it's not real. We're going to just stamp that as, nope, we're not going to worry about it. Why? Because we can't measure it? Like we couldn't measure radio waves back in the day. There are things we can't measure right now. Psychic phenomenon, weird stuff, really strange stuff. But we're entering right now into a period in our history, this spiritual awakening moment, where we're starting to look at things. Have you noticed this? How suddenly more weird, wacky spiritual stuff is just like coming at you. Esoteric concepts, things that were kind of out there before are now kind of getting a little bit more mainstream. It's not just you, it's happening. I mean, just a handful of years ago, would you imagine that Congress would be having open meetings talking about UFOs, UAPs, and the existence of possible alien life forms that we may even have biologics of? That's some wild crap. And that happened just a couple of years. Now, these are just a couple of examples, but when we look at this thing, we start talking about telepathy. That's wild. This is going to be a bit of a dive, so try to follow me on this. There's one area that science doesn't understand, but can't deny and can't shame and shun and go, that's bullshit, like they do with so many other things, like telepathy, near-death experience, things like that, which can't be measured. And that is savant syndrome. Savant syndrome is when someone who has a disability of some sort, usually a very high level of disability, has outrageous skills that they shouldn't be able to have. There's one case of a guy in England who was nonverbal until he was 8 years old, highly autistic, very challenged in his speaking. He flew in a helicopter one time, and then when he got to the ground, he started drawing. He'd never really drawn before. But what he did is he drew amazing cityscapes at a glance. He saw this city one time, I think it was London, and he drew with amazing detail and accuracy what it looked like from the sky. How outrageous. I hear a helicopter. I like that. I got soundtrack. I got some sound effects in the distance. I don't know if you can hear that. Well, that's one example, but there are others which we've heard of these cases where these guys who can't speak, maybe can't even see, sit down at a piano and make amazing, just mind-blowing music. This is savant syndrome. The reason that science can't deny it is because it's right there in front of you. It's hitting you in the face. When a blind guy who can't speak and can't see, whatever, sits down at a piano and plays music, and he's never taken a music lesson in his entire life, how do you deny that? You can't deny it. It's clearly happening. So with savant syndrome, science goes, okay, fine. This is a real thing. Even though we can't measure it, it's a real thing. That's one of the few things that science actually has to do that with, because it's so in your face. Now, there are a lot of other things that should also probably fall into that category. And we're getting to a point now where telepathy might be one of them. This is what happened. There's this doctor, Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, who is a neuroscientist, psychiatrist, and author. She was on the faculty at Harvard. I mean, good scientific mind, right? Well, she was working on consciousness as part of her psychiatric studies and research. And in doing this, she started working with non-speaking autistic people. And there's this great program that's happening now. There's an evolution in the communication with non-speaking autistics and other non-reliable speakers, but with a great intensity on non-speaking autistics, where they're teaching them to read, or rather write and communicate with letterboards. okay, which means they point at letters on a board, and then they can graduate eventually to a keyboard, but it takes a while to get there. But what they're finding now, these programs, one's called S2C and the other one is called RPM, Rapid Prompting Method, and Spelling to Communicate. Amazing programs making incredible headway. And what we're finding is that these non-speaking autistics or challenged speaking autistics are super smart, and they're telling us things that a lot of parents and teachers had suspected, but it's now being confirmed. What they're saying is that they can read their parents' minds. Some of them can read their teachers' minds or people in the family's minds. But it's very common for them to say, I know what mom's thinking. When I heard this, it kind of blew my mind, but at the same time, it sort of didn't. You see, I have a non speaking autistic brother I grew up with. He's slightly older than me, a couple of years. And he used to do things that amazed us, that earned him the nickname Houdini in our house, because we didn't understand how this guy who was special needs and rides a special bus and needs all this extra care could be doing the things he's doing. And one of them was apparently reading my mother's mind. It was one Valentine's Day, my mother got a box of chocolates, and she knows my brother's propensity towards liking sweets, so she definitely didn't want him to get a hold of it because he has no self-control and he gets a bit hyper. So she snuck it in and she hid it in one of our rooms up above the closet, somewhere that he'd have no reason to look. And, he didn't see it, he didn't know it was there. But within an hour or two, not only had he located it somewhere he never went to look, but he'd eaten the whole box. Those sorts of things. So she knew she had it. We knew she had it. We were thinking about it, but no one was talking about it. Somehow Joe figured it out, found it, and ate the whole box. Stories like this were repeated over and over again in Hennessy Powell's work. She dove into this, and the more she talked to these spellers, as they're called, using the letterboards and the keyboards, the more they confirmed that they could read minds. And even more than that, they could read the thoughts of people they'd never met from miles away, who they met in the ether and had conversations with, people who were also non-speakers. And they shared details about each other's life that they couldn't know otherwise with these researchers. These are people who had never met, in many cases, who lived hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, who were having conversations about very specific things about their lives. And each one of these people who have never met, who are non-speakers, could tell specific things about the other person when asked. So what's going on? I'm going to make a recommendation. There's a wonderful podcast called the Telepathy Tapes that dives into this. It goes into it much deeper than I am here. But if this gets your attention and you're interested in it, I'll share a link in the show notes. Check it out. And I have a feeling it'll have the same effect on you it had on me. There's something amazing happening in the world today, something incredible. We're here with the best seat in the house to witness this thing that's happening. And as far as we can tell, in talking to these spellers, what they're telling us is that it is something of a spiritual nature. They're talking about very esoteric concepts, and they're talking about this shift. They're talking about God. Yeah, the telepathy tapes will take you through all this research step by step and take you to places way beyond where I've taken you today. And I think you'll be amazed. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching the channel. Please comment below. Good, bad, questionable, whatever. All comments are welcome. I love the conversations we're having here. I love the community we're building. If you haven't checked out the Soul podcast yet, check that out. You'll love it. It's topics like this, but in longer form. And you'll find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'll share a link in the show notes. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you all very soon.